They weren't politicians, they weren't academics, they were factory workers, barely surviving on broken wages. No power, no privilege, just 28 working class men who decided to open a shop. Not for profit, but for survival. And without realizing it, they sparked a global movement. This is Stories from the CoOp Evolution, a series exploring the people, principles, and turning points of a different kind of economy. In 1844, Rochdale was a town on the edge. England was deep in the Industrial Revolution. The old rural way of life had been dismantled. People were pushed off the land by enclosure laws. They now lived in crowded industrial towns, crammed into unsanitary housing, disconnected from food, land, and each other. Factory wages were low, irregular, and barely enough to survive on. You couldn't grow your own food anymore. Everything had to be bought. But the shops were owned by the same factory owners who underpaid you. And the food, flour cut with chalk, milk thinned with water, butter stretched with lard. It was fraud sold as survival. Starvation and disease were common. Mothers died in winter. Children went to bed cold and hungry. In this chaos, 28 men decided to take matters into their own hands. They would take back control, starting with something simple: food. Each one saved 2p a week. After months of sacrifice, they pulled together £28, which is roughly £4,500 in today's money. Just enough to rent a small shop and buy a bit of stock. In December 1844, they opened the doors. The shop sold 4 items: flour, sugar, butter, and candles. That was it. But it was enough to begin. They refused to sell spoiled or diluted goods. They set fair prices. They made quality a principle, not a privilege. And most importantly, the shop was owned by its members, not a private owner or investor. Every member had one vote, no matter how much they contributed. Any surplus was shared fairly or reinvested to benefit the group. They stayed open late, so working people could actually shop after work. They didn't ask permission. They didn't wait for politicians or philanthropists. They just did it, and it worked. Over time, their values were written down and refined. These principles became the foundation for the modern co-op movement. Here's what they stood for, then and now. Voluntary and open membership, which means no one is excluded. Anyone willing to participate, regardless of status or background, was welcome. Democratic member control. 1 member, 1 vote. Not £1, 1 vote. Member economic participation, which means profits weren't hoarded, they were shared or reinvested for collective benefit. Autonomy and independence. They answered to their members, not outside investors or the state. Education, training, and information. They knew that knowledge was power. Members were encouraged to learn, grow, and understand their role in the system. Cooperation among cooperatives. They believed in solidarity, co-ops supporting co-ops to strengthen the whole. And concern for community. Profits were never the end goal, people were. They weren't just principles on paper. They were the logic behind the practice, the structure behind the shop. And what started in Rochdale didn't stay there. Other working class communities copied the model. Hundreds of co-op stores opened across the UK within decades. Eventually, many merged into larger regional co-ops, some of which became the Co-op Group, which is the co-op you see on your high street, the one we know today. The model also inspired credit unions, building societies, and early NHS-style health programs. Internationally, the Rochdale framework was adopted in Italy, Argentina, Japan, Canada, and Spain. Not just imitations, structural replicas. Member-owned, democratically controlled, surplus shared. The Rochdale pioneers didn't just sell food, they built a foundation, one that would go on to feed millions, not just in body, but in dignity, rights, and voice. And like many great movements, it started quickly. With 28 people, 4 basic items, and the courage to do something different. This is their story, and it's one of ours.